The room was colder than a morgue, and twice as quiet. I sat at the metal table, my hands folded, watching the second hand on the wall clock tick past the 3-minute mark. Across from me, my father, Stephen, jabbed a finger into the polished surface like he was trying to drill for oil. He looked at the disciplinary committee, his face a mask of righteous indignation. "She is a fraud," he said, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "She never passed the bar. She has been practicing illegally for 5 years." Beside him, my sister Jessica smoothed the skirt of her designer dress, a small, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She looked confident. She looked like she had just won the lottery. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They were trying to strip my license, ruin my reputation, and send me to prison. I didn't panic. I didn't interrupt. I just checked my watch. They had exactly 4 minutes left before the trap snapped shut. Before I tell you exactly how they walked into their own prison cell, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had a family member try to destroy your success just because they couldn't control it? 48 hours earlier, my phone had lit up with a text from my mother. "Emergency. Dad collapsed. Come to the Ritz immediately." I didn't stop to question why they were at a luxury hotel instead of an emergency room. I just ran. That is the conditioning of being the reliable daughter. My name is Lyra. I am 29 years old. And for my entire life, I have been the family fixer. The safety net they used, and then resented for catching them. You run because you are trained to save them, even when you know they wouldn't cross the street to save you. I burst into the suite, expecting paramedics and oxygen tanks. Instead, I found a cheese board, a bottle of expensive scotch, and a council of war. My father wasn't dying. He was pouring a drink, his hand steady as a surgeon's. My brother-in-law, Ted, was weeping into his hands on the velvet sofa. Jessica was pacing the floor like a caged tiger in Louboutins, her face twisted in that familiar look of panic and entitlement. "Sit down," my father said, not even looking at me. "Ted has a situation." A situation. That was a polite way of saying, the FBI had just handed down an indictment for $15 million in wire fraud and embezzlement. They laid it out for me, like they were ordering dinner. Ted was innocent. Obviously, the government was overreaching. And I, the family lawyer, was going to step in, take the case pro bono, and make it all go away. "Family helps family," my mother said, smoothing her skirt as if that settled the matter. "We need you to file the motion to dismiss by Monday." I looked at Ted. I looked at the files scattered on the coffee table. I knew exactly what was in them. I knew the account numbers, the shell companies, and the dates of every illegal transfer. I knew because I wasn't just a lawyer. I was the specialized attorney who had spent the last 2 years quietly building the case that put those files on that table. But I couldn't tell them that. Not yet. The seal hadn't been lifted. "I can't represent him," I said, my voice flat. "I have a conflict of interest." The room temperature dropped 20 degrees. "A conflict," Jessica laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. "You mean you're too lazy. You mean you're too selfish." They didn't ask what the conflict was. They just launched the missiles. My father called me a parasite. My mother said I was useless, that they should have pushed me harder, that my state school degree was a waste of their investment. An investment, mind you, that consisted of $500 and a gas card 10 years ago. They laughed at me then, calling me small and incapable, unaware that the person they were mocking was the only reason they weren't already in handcuffs. Then Jessica stopped pacing. She walked over to me, her eyes bright with malice. "You are going to take this case," she hissed, "or I am going to report you to the Bar Association. I will tell them you are incompetent. I will tell them you scammed your clients. I will say whatever I have to say to get your license stripped. You help Ted, or I ruin you before dinner." I looked at her. I looked at the parents who stood by and let her threaten me. They thought they were cornering a frightened animal. They didn't realize they were poking a landmine. I stood up and buttoned my coat. I didn't scream. I didn't explain the law to them. I just looked my sister in the eye. "Do your worst," I I said. And I walked out the door while they screamed my name. I walked out of the Ritz and straight into the waiting town car. The driver didn't ask where to go. He already knew. 30 minutes later, I was walking through the glass doors of my office building. Not a shared workspace or a basement cubicle, but the 34th floor of the most aggressive litigation firm in the city. My name was on the door. My name was on the lease. My name was on the checks that paid the salaries of 12 junior associates who were terrified of disappointing me. I unlocked my office and went straight to the wall safe behind my desk. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was even. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest that felt a lot like resolve. I spun the dial. The clicks, sounding like gunshots in the quiet room. Inside, next to the sealed indictment against my brother-in-law, was a thick manila folder labeled Asset Acquisition. I pulled it out and spread the documents across my desk. The deed of trust. The promissory note. The assignment of mortgage. 6 months ago, my parents had defaulted on their mortgage. They didn't tell me. Of course, they were too busy leasing new cars and funding Jessica's failed lifestyle brand to pay the bank. When the foreclosure notice hit, it didn't go to them. It went to a holding company I had set up specifically for this purpose. I bought their debt. I bought their house. I bought the roof over their heads for $200,000. Paid in full. I remembered the day I signed the papers. I remembered how they had laughed at my state school graduation, telling me I was lucky to get a degree at all. I remembered how they had forgotten to pick me up from the airport when I came home for Christmas because they were too busy helping Jessica move into her new condo. They broke me then. They made me feel small and insignificant. But today, I am the one holding the hammer. For 6 months, I had been their landlord. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't asked for rent. I hadn't even told them I owned the note. I wanted to give them a chance. I wanted to believe that if things got bad enough, they would come to me not as a bank, but as a daughter. I wanted to believe that somewhere under the layers of narcissism and neglect, there was a family worth saving. But then came the hotel room, the ambush, the threats, the realization that to them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource to be mined until empty and then discarded. I looked at the foreclosure notice. It was dated for tomorrow. I could stop it. I could make a call, write a check, and make the problem disappear. It would be so easy. It would be what the old Lyra would have done, the Lyra who was desperate for their approval. The Lyra who thought love was something you could earn if you just paid enough for it. But that Lyra was gone. She died in a luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton. I picked up my pen and signed the eviction order. The ink was black and permanent. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. They had taken everything from me. My confidence. My peace. My trust. Now, I was just balancing the books. I put the file back in the safe and locked it. Tomorrow, they would try to take my license. Tomorrow, they would try to destroy my life. But they didn't know that I had already destroyed theirs. They were sleeping in a house they didn't own. Fighting a war they couldn't win. Against an enemy they didn't even recognize. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the city lights. The phone on my desk buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "See you at the hearing. Don't be late." I didn't reply. I just smiled. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a masterclass. We were back in the hearing room. The air conditioning hummed. A low drone that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. The committee chair. A gray-haired man with eyes like flint. Read the complaint aloud. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed I had forged my law degree on Photoshop. It claimed I had solicited clients in hospital waiting rooms. It claimed I had low moral character and was a danger to the public. My father sat up straighter as the list of accusations went on, nodding along like a bobblehead doll. He looked solemn. The grieving parent forced to put down a rabid dog. He was enjoying this. For the first time in years, he felt important. He felt like the patriarch restoring order to a world where his least favorite daughter had gotten too big for her britches. Then, they called Jessica to testify. She took the stand, clutching a tissue she didn't need. She started with the waterworks, a performance she had perfected in high school to get out of gym class. She told the committee how worried she was about me. She said I had always been troubled and prone to fantasies. She painted a picture of a sad, delusional girl playing dress-up in a lawyer's suit. But then, the tears stopped. The arrogance took over. Jessica couldn't help herself. She liked the sound of her own voice too much. When the chair asked how she had compiled such a detailed dossier of my alleged fraud, she didn't say she hired an investigator. She didn't say she found it by accident. She leaned into the microphone, smoothed her hair, and smiled. "I did it myself," she said, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "I tracked down the discrepancies. I drafted the affidavits for my parents. I researched the statutes on fraud. I put this whole case together because I know how to spot a fake. I know the law better than she does." I watched her from across the table. I didn't feel angry. I felt a cold, clinical fascination. It's a phenomenon psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is the confidence of the incompetent. Jessica thought because she had watched a few crime documentaries and argued in Instagram comments, she knew how to practice law. She sat there, preening, completely unaware that she was digging her own grave. She didn't know that by admitting she drafted the legal affidavits for our parents and researched the statutes to build a case for them, she was confessing to a crime, unauthorized practice of law. In this state, drafting legal documents for others without a license is a felony. She thought she was proving her superiority. She was actually reading her own Miranda rights into the record. I looked at the court reporter. Her fingers were flying across the stenotype machine, capturing every word. I looked at the committee chair. His eyes had narrowed. He wasn't looking at Jessica like she was a hero anymore. He was looking at her like she was a liability. But Jessica didn't see it. She was too busy winning the imaginary movie in her head. She finished her testimony, shot me a look of pure venom, and stepped down. She sat next to my father, and they exchanged a look of triumph. They thought they had just nailed my coffin shut. They didn't realize they had just locked themselves inside it with me, and I was the only one with the key. The committee chair cleared his throat. He reached into a folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the killing blow. Or at least, that's what my parents thought. "We have a letter here," the chair said, his voice grave. "It is from the dean of students at my law school. It states that they have no record of a student named Lyra ever attending, let alone graduating with honors." The room went silent. My mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand. A performance worthy of an Oscar. My father shook his head, looking at the floor as if the shame were too much to bear. Jessica just smirked. She had won. She had forged the document. Of course, probably cut and pasted the letterhead from a Google image search, but right now, in this room, it looked real enough to end me. "Ms. Lyra," the chair began. "Do you have a response?" The double doors slammed open before I could answer. Judge Sterling walked in. In this state, Sterling wasn't just a judge, he was the law. The man behind the largest corruption trials of the decade. He wasn't supposed to be here. My father stood, stunned. "Your Honor, we didn't call you." Sterling ignored him, walked straight to the witness stand, sat down, and looked at the chair. "Swear me in." After the oath, his gaze locked on me. "Counselor, state for the record why you refused to represent your brother-in-law in his embezzlement trial." I stood. "Because I'm not his defense attorney. I'm Relators Counsel." The chair frowned. "Qui tam?" "Yes. 2 years ago, a whistleblower brought me evidence of a $15 million fraud scheme run by my brother-in-law. I built the case for the Department of Justice. I couldn't defend him. I'm prosecuting him." The room went dead silent. Sterling tapped the letter, accusing me of falsifying my credentials. "Interesting. Miss Lyra clerked for me for 2 years and argued 3 cases before the Supreme Court. So either this letter is false, or it's a forged document submitted to obstruct justice." He looked at my sister. For the first time, she looked afraid. The hearing ended in under a minute. The complaint was dismissed with prejudice. The chair apologized to me and warned my family they were lucky I wasn't pressing charges. I turned to leave. Jessica blocked the door. I did it, she screamed. I wrote the complaint. I drafted the affidavits. I researched the fraud statutes. I built the case against you. She was proud until I turned back to Sterling. Did the record catch that? He nodded and signaled the U.S. Marshals. You just confessed to the unauthorized practice of law, Sterling said. That's a felony. And you did it to obstruct a federal investigation. The handcuffs clicked shut. In the hallway, my parents begged me to stop it. I can't, I said. The state is prosecuting, not me. I handed my father an envelope. You have 30 days to vacate the house. You own it, he whispered. I bought the debt, I said. I was going to let you stay, but you tried to destroy my life. So now there are consequences. I walked away. That night, I deleted their numbers and reopened the DOJ case. The trial began the next week. 6 months later, Ted was convicted on all counts, 20 years in federal prison. My parents lost the house. Jessica is awaiting sentencing. People ask if I regret it. I don't miss them. I miss the idea of them. For years, I thought loyalty meant burning yourself to keep others warm. Now I know better. Self-respect isn't negotiable. They called me a fraud, but they were pretending. I was real the whole time.